Censorship of the shock jock. Merriam-Webster's dictionary defines the term shock jock as a radio personality noted for provocative or inflammatory commentary. But what does that really mean? Most shock jocks sell a form of radio known as shock radio, raunchy radio, or topless radio. A shock jock tends to use sexually explicit stunts and jokes, ethnic and cultural attacks, off-color listener call-ins, and the objectification of women to cater to their predominantly male audience. For example, Howard Stern frequently has porn stars on his show. He then details for the viewer how large their breasts are, how nice other parts of their anatomy are, and reiterates ad nauseum how horny he is and how he'd love to them. The term shock jock was first used in 1986, yet looking back, many DJs of the 60s and 70s would be considered shock jocks today. Unlike most DJs in recent years, shock jocks have fallen under increasing scrutiny for the content for which they broadcast. In 2004 alone, the radio industry generated over 1 million complaints regarding their content. When these complaints roll in, there is one giant organization ready and willing to hear them all, the FCC. In the first half of the 20th century, radio and television were becoming readily available and increasingly popular. With these two mediums growing in popularity, the government felt that someone needed to come in to help police the broadcast industry. That help came with the creation of the Federal Communications Commission, or the FCC. In the early 30s, Congress passed a bill called the Communications Act of 1934. The bill, which expanded on the Radio Act of 1927, created a governing body whose sole purpose was to regulate the content being made available to the general public. According to Section 2 of the Communications Act of 1934, the provisions of this act shall apply to all interstate and forward communications by wire or radio and all interstate and foreign transmission of energy by radio, which originates and or is received within the United States, and to all persons engaged within the United States in such communication or such transmission of energy by radio, and to the licensing and regulating of all radio stations as hereafter provided. The article then goes on to tell the regulatory rules for radio, television, and telephone communication. Such regulations included refraining from the use of obscene words or gestures via radio and television broadcasts. It made it unlawful to harass or threaten any persons via telephone or other telecommunication device. Made it illegal to buy, sell, or import devices that interfered with broadcast signals, and much more. Now that the public had a watchdog, it was only a matter of time before the dog would bite someone. When the dog finally bit, it bit hard. In 1972, comedian George Carlin recorded a skit known today as Filthy Words. The skit chronicled the use of 7 words, shit, piss, fuck, cunt, cocksucker, motherfucker, and tits, and how they were regulated on television. In 1973, a radio station in New York decided to air this skit in its entirety at 2 p.m. Although the skit came with a disclaimer, many people tuned in far too late to hear it.
You can't say fart on television, we know that. You can't say fart. And you can't say fuck either on television. However, you can refer to fucking. You can talk about fucking. They do that all the time. Some of the times, the show you're watching, 2 people are probably fucking in the other room. Fucking is all right. Fucking is part of the plot. A lot of plots are based on fucking. Will they fuck? Should they fuck? Have they fucked? Did they fuck? Will they fuck again? Will they get sick from fucking? Are they fucking too much? Will they fuck each other's friends? Will they have a baby from fucking? Will they be sorry they fucked? Will they be glad they fucked? All fuck stories. Every honeymoon joke is a fuck joke. Have you ever noticed it? Otherwise the people wouldn't be on their honeymoon in the joke. They'd be knights or they'd be sailors or something. If they're on their honeymoon, there's gotta be a fuck joke. Every quiz master has stood there with his newlywed couple and said, and I understand you folks are on your honeymoon. Lots of fucking going on here. Lots of fucking over here. So they talk about fucking all they want. They just don't call it that. They don't call it what it is. They call it other things. They call it making love, which is fine. They call it going to bed with someone, having an affair, sleeping together. But they don't call it fucking.
Within the following weeks, a parent who heard the broadcast while in the car with his young child had argued for the FCC to punish the radio program. The case went to the Supreme Court, where Pacifica Foundation, the owners of the radio station, argued that Carlin is not mouthing obscenities, he is merely using words to satirize as harmless and essentially silly our attitudes towards these words. The Supreme Court argued using U.S. Code Section 1464, broadcasting obscene language, which made it a federal offense to utter any obscene, indecent, or profane language by means of radio communications. They argued that Carlin's act was not obscene, it was merely indecent, yet by the wording of 1464, the FCC had the right to punish Pacifica. This decision broadened the scope of indecency and gave the FCC a greater ability to censor broadcast media. It was here that the FCC really began its crusade, and the shock jock was the next target. Petey Greene was a former convict who, after he was released from prison, was hired as a disc jockey at a Washington, D.C. area radio station. His radio program was short-lived only due to his immense popularity. He was becoming well known for his offensive language and the shock value of his show. Thus, the first shock jock was born. He became so popular in the mid-70s that he was offered his own television show. That show, Petey Greene's Washington, had a successful 6-year run. Petey often had guest stars appear on his show, and one such guest was Howard Stern, an up-and-coming DJ at the time.
With a successful radio program, Petey was offered his own television show. Originally broadcast on public access, Petey Greene's Washington became an underground hit and allowed Petey to invite anyone he wanted onto the show.
My guest tonight is a young man who I think that he's sharp. Of course, everybody don't agree with me. White people say he's gross. Black people say he's intelligent. I don't know.
How come I don't get no big chair?
I'm talking to Howard. What's your name?
Stern, Nipsey.
So now, you know.
I like when you rhyme. I like when you rhyme, Nipsey. Do that for me.
You look like Nipsey. Nipsey Russell.
Hey.
But hold it now. You know, ain't no cracker gonna take over now. You know, you got. Now hold. The one thing about it already, see, you got a nigga working for you. You got a nigga working for you, but you don't run this nigga here, so cracker, you shut up.
I think the language that Petey used was intended to shock, and I think some of it was just the nature of his environment and upbringing.
Now this is a good and crazy cracker, so I'm gonna let him talk, but I want all the niggas at home to let this cracker educate you how ignorant crackers can do while I
where's the
educate
count?
crackers how intelligent niggas can. Go ahead and rap, nigga.
Wait a second. Kind of name is Petey Greene. That's a slave name.
Words have never, never, never hurt anyone. It's the action of a person that has the lasting effect.
On Saturdays, when you used to be on Saturdays,
Right.
I would get up at 8 o'clock to watch a show. People say, well, what are you watching that guy for?
So what are you watching that nigga for?
What, the nigga.
Right, say it. Get it out.
Forget the word nigga.
You know that a cracker looks at all niggas as one. You understand? You look at Robin as a nigga like you look at me as a nigga. Now, you might take a little step another dimension and try to jive it off, but all crackers and all niggas have racism in them, including me. So we all got a little bit of racism in us. So you could be raised up in New York and heard them talk about niggas, and I was raised up in Washington and heard them talk about crackers. The racial thing is not what you and I are about. We just like people. I know that you like it.
The two shared mutual respect for one another as their subject matter tended to be very similar. Petey Greene, the pioneer of shock radio.
Todd Allen Clem, also known as Bubba the Love Sponge, hosted the Bubba the Love Sponge show on several Clear Channel Communications radio stations. Bubba was well known for his controversial topics and use of shocking content on his show, yet nothing was more controversial than the infamous hog incident of 2001. On his show, a 70-pound feral pig named Andy was castrated and killed live on air. A year later, Bubba and 3 other members of the show were arrested and tried for animal cruelty, but were found not guilty and avoided jail time and hefty fines. During the trial, a veterinarian was called as a witness and confirmed that the hog was castrated and killed in a humane manner, yet animal activists remained enraged. The hog incident wasn't Bubba's only problem. The FCC fined Clear Channel Communications $755,000 because his programs were, quote, designed to pander to, titillate, and shock listeners, end quote. While Bubba the Love Sponge was an interesting and controversial shock jock, Don Imus took things to a whole new level. Imus was also a talk radio host and had been around since the early 70s. Imus was never one to sugarcoat a topic and had crossed the line many times in his career, yet none was more recognizable than the Rutgers incident. While discussing the Rutgers women's basketball team in April of 2007, Imus referred to them as a group of nappy-headed hoes.
So I watched the basketball game last night between a little bit of Rutgers and Tennessee, the women's final.
Yeah, Tennessee won last night. 7th championship for Pat Summitt. Man, they beat Rutgers by 13 points.
That's some rough girls from Rutgers, man. They got tattoos and
some hardcore hoes.
That's some nappy-headed hoes there, I'm going to tell you that now.
This comment received immediate national attention, and his show was canceled by CBS. He also got attention from Time magazine and had an article written about him titled, "The Imus Fallout, Who Can't Say What?" The article brought up the point that many rap artists and celebrities get away with saying hoe, faggot, or fucking Jews with no backlash other than a few negative peeps from a parent or two. But as soon as Don Imus said it on the radio, he was fired and received far more criticism than anyone else. Right when the dust had settled from the Rutgers incident, Imus found himself right back in the public doghouse after making racist comments about Dallas Cowboys defensive back Adam Pac-Man Jones. Imus inferred that since Jones was black, it made sense that he was suspended for his involvement in a shooting at a nightclub in 2007. Although he may have crossed the line when using Pac-Man's race to explain his suspension, Imus was not suspended or fined after the incident. Imus also had a well-documented feud with then-newcomer Howard Stern during their tenure at WNBC between 1982 and 1985. While they did not have a show together, the two would often appear on the other show and give a brief glimpse of their clear disagreements. The fact that Imus was already a well-known DJ may have helped propel Stern to the position he is in today. Howard Stern is undoubtedly the most well-known shock jock to date, garnering the nickname King of All Media. Throughout his career, Stern has been involved in various radio and television shows. He even made a pseudo-biographical movie called Howard Stern's Private Parts. Throughout his storied career, Stern has managed to amass over $2.5 million in fines from the FCC. Yet with all of his run-ins with the FCC, none was more important than the Censoring. During a live broadcast, Stern went into great detail about his use of a product called Censoring. The product, as told by Stern, is used to bring a minty smell to your rear end. The FCC jumped into action and fined Clear Channel Communications $500,000. After the fallout from the Censoring incident, Stern announced that he would be taking his talents to satellite radio in 2006, where the FCC had much less control over what was said on air. Shortly after his move to satellite, his name was added to the Forbes magazine's World's Most Powerful Celebrities list. It is impossible to talk about shock jocks without mentioning Howard Stern. He is the present-day definition of shock jock and has laid the path for shock jocks of the future.
While the shock jock may be broadcasting obscene material, do they deserve the treatment they get from the FCC? We say no. Most shock jocks are leaving for satellite stations where they are free of FCC regulation. However, since it is a paid subscription, they have to leave a large portion of their fan base behind, perhaps a small price to pay for free speech. Yet people are continuing to push for FCC regulation in all mediums, including satellite, which would collectively kill the shock jock. But even if the FCC does regulate them, the shock jock knows one thing for sure. If their content is shocking enough to warrant a fine, they must be doing their job right. Motherfucking FCC, let the